Let's start the show by talking about my sponsor, Paloma Verde, and their new website, palomaverdecbd.com. Head over to palomaverdecbd.com and check them out for all of your CBD needs. They've got the gummies, tinctures, salves. So if you're needing anything to maybe chill you out, something to help you get mellowed out, something for your joint pain and stiffness, go over to palomaverdecbd.com and give them a check out. Carlos and Vanessa are awesome people. They run a great company. And if you enter the promo code FACTS at checkout, you'll get 25% off your order. Plus, any order over $75, you get free shipping. So, I don't know what you're waiting for. Head over to palomaverdecbd.com and check them out. Let's start the show. This episode will be completely taken out of context. Welcome to the Fact Check This podcast. All right, so I appreciate you agreeing to come on. I really wanted to kind of touch base with you and talk about.
Sorry, there's a dog. Okay, he's leaving now. Good. Sorry about that. He's very excited. I just got home visiting my parents after a long trip, and the dog's very excited. So
that's funny. Hours. I'll record like solo episodes and stuff, and I'll be in here. And if I leave the door open, she comes running in immediately. It's like as soon as she hears me talking and working on stuff, she just comes running in and has to see what's going on. She's always excited and wants to help.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad we can accommodate that as well.
So I wanted to get you on. I know. So are you a Republican or? I know you.
Yeah, so I'm the Republican state representative for Iowa House District 82. I'm in my third year, and I've been a Republican since Ron Paul's 2007-2008 Iowa caucus campaign, and kind of stuck around on an amateur, semi-professional basis for a number of years, and then naturally, find yourself in this position. And so I first ran for this office in 2014 and lost, and then was able to take advantage of an opportunity in 2018 and kind of found a groove, and then was able to, I guess, adopt some outspoken political leadership that's been noticed in a variety of ways, and have been able to make some progress on some key issues and stake out some ground. And it's been a very fun, challenging experience, but very, very rewarding as well.
No doubt. So that was kind of what I wanted to focus on. I'm in Indiana, which is probably like most of the Midwest and Bible Belt type of states. It's very heavily Republican, and even trying to we had a really good governor's race in 2020. The Indiana Libertarian Party candidate did better than any governor that I'm aware of in the country as far as a libertarian candidate goes. And even with that, it was like 13% of the vote or something, but it was a really good turnout. But what I ran into a lot in trying to sell some of the messaging and stuff, because he was highly anti-mask mandate, anti-lockdown. Like he ran on all the important topics that you really want to see a good candidate run on, especially one that's all about freedom and liberty, like people who lean libertarian are, whether you're in the GOP or the Libertarian Party. Like those are the ideas that you want to promote. And we would get pushback from like really hardcore right wingers on what seemed like basic ideas of freedom and liberty that they should be behind, because I don't know. I'm not sure why there's such a hardcore pushback. So I wanted to talk to you about like what's some of the things that you've been able to utilize in promoting a message of liberty to actually get through to people and have success, both in getting elected and also beyond that, like in because I know you've had some success in getting some legislation at least looked at and if not passed.
Yeah, so you hit on a couple different moving pieces, and they're all kind of important. I think the first thing I want to just say is that like these campaigns matter, and then candidates matter, and then the messaging that's presented to the public really matters. So in theory, hopefully what you're accomplishing by, supporting a liberty candidate or having a libertarian with a good platform is that you're, competing for the voters that believe in that, and then maybe depriving another candidate of votes that they would need to, achieve an electoral success or whatever. And so I think in theory, most third party activism is still kind of with the intention to influence one of the major parties in one direction or another, in theory. And I know, I think the Indiana Republican governor, I don't even know the guy's name off the top of my head, but from what I've gathered, you guys have a lot of problems over there. And the Republican Party, in a lot of these bigger states, like Ohio definitely stands out as one, but Indiana as well is pretty corrupt. And, I know Mike Pence came from Indiana and got on the national scene, and he's been pretty much good for nothing and pretty worthless on most anything. So yeah, it's just tough that each state has its own kind of swamp as well, that encompasses both major parties. Usually, basically, the way politics works is there's a kind of tightly knit group of financiers and special interests that are then connected to, hold leverage over these various candidates by becoming their, campaign consultants or financial advisors, and then holding the purse strings or whatever, and are able to leverage a lot of enormous power, just by funneling donations or whatever, and being in a position to say that, oh, if you do this sort of thing, it's going to be a lot harder for me to raise money for you. Those kinds of snide kind of comments of anyway, it is just a very swampy, tight knit game. And that's essentially what you're trying to do, is you're trying to divorce the political leader from the special interests and get them more connected to the people. And obviously I think that's probably easier in less populous states like Iowa. I think that's really one of the advantages of the Iowa caucus and the Ron Paul campaign in particular, is that because there was so much effort in Iowa through the Ron Paul caucus cycles, 2 of them, and then to a lesser extent Rand, there was an emphasis on getting involved in the Republican Party, filling in a lot of like-minded people from the grassroots level to the state convention on up. And so it's been a more kind of fleshed out, or it's been a dynamic that's been more invested in Iowa in particular. And so I think that's why I've been able to find, a niche of success within the Iowa Republican Party, because these were seeds we planted 10 years ago. So yeah, obviously every state's going to be a little bit different. Texas is kind of an interesting example because their governor wasn't acting right either, but then he got 2 or several kind of seemingly credible primary challenges that would be enough to at least be a nuisance and very annoying. And then some people credit that for some better governing decisions. So it's definitely clear. I guess that's what I'm kind of, trying to just demonstrate, is that, these campaigns and these candidates and the way the electoral cycles are influenced, it does matter and affect policy sometimes in a pretty, immediate way. As far as Indiana, from what I know there's at least a handful of legislators that are pretty good and solid or liberty leaning. And I know we had some at the Hazlitt Coalition. And so definitely working with them, because I think that one of the most difficult things is figuring out what's going on and kind of just being an observer and observing the battlefield, so to speak. So your inside guy or the people who, if you're an elected representative, hopefully that's a professional full-time position, basically, where, that's your job, to inform the people of what's going on in politics, inform the people, here are the threats of liberty, here's where we need to mobilize and address and draw attention. A lot of politics is just really paying attention to certain things, right? Harnessing the collective attention and getting some sort of initiative. Certainly politicians are always selling vision and getting people to buy into their vision of leadership and that sort of thing. So it's for me as a politician, my work is basically in communicating with people, working the phone, writing emails, making sure my campaign pieces are out, and then I'm advertising and staying connected. It's basically just glorified PR and just, communication, if I'm working hard, I'm probably on the phone for 5 or 6 or 8 hours a day or something. And that's what I look like, working. It's just being on the phone, talking to people. So I kind of forgot the actual intent of your question. I think it's basically, how do you carve out and kind of get a beachhead for yourself in a way that influences things? I started out as a party activist. So like I said, we did the caucus to convention cycle, and early on, like it was 2008 under the John McCain days, and just like showing up and being kind of a nuisance and kind of being that conscious, and even just showing up and like, yeah, I'm not supporting McCain. Like obviously that's very politically inflammatory, but it is just kind of interesting. You get to hold that space and kind of represent that. And then, so I served in various party positions. I remember I was elected like the state rules committee, and then I ran for delegate for conventions, and I lost, and I became like after I lost in 2014, I became the chairman of the Jefferson County GOP, which was just an awful, I mean, I have really bad memory of it, because it is like, some of these party positions are kind of pointless, and they are very difficult and tedious. And yeah, you're not going to get a lot of things done, but like it still is. Oh, this is probably the most important thing. I should have led with this. Just how important long-term relationships are. And that's basically all government is, I mean, politics is just basically the given arrangement and relationship of various power structures in any particular moment in time. And, it can be very fluid, and it needs to be supported by the people. So like, my position as state representative is basically, I'm just investing in and managing a bunch of various relationships, the strongest of which will be long-term relationships, and then just managing those over a multitude of different issues and periods of time to, make sure those relationships have enough support when election time comes around. And thankfully, in my two previous elections, I had just enough relationships and so like, that's like, even like this term political capital. What does political capital mean? Political capital means that I can call on someone. Well, in one way to define it is like in my job in the House, if I vote on an amendment or force a vote on an amendment, how many people are going to vote with me? So that's an interesting way to measure political capital. Otherwise, it's just like, having these relationships to cash in on, and like having people that if I need help, whether that's, I don't know, reaching out, just anything it could be, but just that, yeah, when I pick up the phone and try to lead or direct someone, that they're going to answer. And that's just political capital. So I don't know. It's interesting. Those are just some initial thoughts. Hopefully some of that made sense or somehow addressed what you were asking. I don't even know.
Yeah, I think it kind of did. It got to what I was like, some of my concerns with. We're in a tough position with Indiana because, like you had said, it is pretty bad. I mean, I was a big time, or I was big into the Republican Party when I was in college, and I did a lot of activism type stuff, and like I was very happy with it up until 2007, 2008. Watching the end of the Bush presidency, and then McCain's nomination, and just kind of the direction that the Republican Party seemed to be going at the time, I got really disenfranchised and kind of moved away from politics entirely. And coming back and getting more involved again now here over the last several years, and getting involved with the Libertarian Party here in Indiana, because we do have a fairly strong Libertarian Party. And the GOP in Indiana is just pretty terrible. We do have a handful of guys that are really good, and we've been able to work with them, not so much to get stuff passed as to kill stuff that would have been bad. But even with that, like it's been tough. There's still a lot of stuff that because the Republican Party of Indiana is just so like across the board bad, they'll still ram certain things through even though it's terrible. And I don't know what we at this point I don't know what we do about it, but like,
well, I say, I mean, just keep being vocal about it. And now I'm remembering the question you asked before. You were asking about right-wing backlash from supporting libertarians. But yeah, I mean, so I think that's the importance of one, that you're engaged, that if something's happening at the Capitol, you're like aware of it. Like that's literally step one to paying attention. And we don't have that in Iowa, I think. At least I haven't noticed it, where a lot of important things are happening and the Libertarian Party has no idea. They're not connected. And if they are connected, they're not like communicating to anything people care about. So it's very important in terms of like being public service, like that you're very much responding to the needs of people, and that you're communicating directly to the people as much as possible. And so like political power is going to come from leveraging people. And I mean, being able to get 13% of the vote statewide is very significant and represents like a good starting point to, just make sure that you're leveraged. And if you had all those voters and you had them, identified and calling their state rep or whatever it is, I mean, it would be a very powerful mobilizing force. So, I mean, just by the fact that you're paying attention, and then just make sure you're not letting anyone off the hook, that if the Republican Party does something really awful, you call it out, and from my perspective, you attack them from the right, where you explain that they're not being fiscally conservative, that they're disrespecting the Constitution, that they're playing into Joe Biden's hands, and they're just as bad as the Democrats. That's how you're going to affect, trying to affect that Republican base would be, showing to them why their Republican leadership is doing such a piss poor job, and then hopefully inspiring them to something better. And that might not be voting for Libertarian, but that might be just not voting at all, or it might be, I mean, it's tough because the choices are limited, and finding the proper way to politically express yourself is difficult. But we need to just figure out a way to do it. But even then, like, all politics being local too. And so even if you use the Libertarian Party platform and they have a really great position statement on something, like, even if you're just connecting with your neighbor, and just because maybe you don't get to do what they want, maybe they won't vote for your candidate, but by virtue of having a complicated discussion on a controversial issue, again, you're investing in a relationship, and who knows what dividends that could somehow play, especially when I think one of the big advantages of our system is that power really is diffused. And with the pandemic, we've seen how local governments have been very important as well. And even like in my community, something like what we had a controversial policy that was decided by the Parks and Rec Board, which was an appointed board, that no one really knew existed. So it's like, there's a lot of opportunities to get involved. And even this, I mean, if there's any young people watching, like, I got my career, quote unquote, started by student government, and I had a position to be the University of Iowa student government liaison to the city council. And basically, that position required me to show up to a year's worth of city council meetings. So just by being there in the room and kind of absorbing that, you get a great front row education to, like, okay, how does the city council operate? How do these discussions go? Like, what are the contentious issues? What are people showing up and asking about, because when I won my elections, both of them, I was responding to very specific needs in the community. And the first election, 2018, it was an issue on utility equipment, smart meters, which most voters didn't care about, but enough did that it was enough to swing the election. And I was able to champion that issue just by being involved in the local politics. I wouldn't have known that unless I was actively paying attention to my community and recognized a political opportunity where the incumbent was not serving the people. So just being engaged, being aware is step one. So it doesn't matter if you're engaged and aware as a Libertarian or as a Republican or as a Democrat, but again, most people aren't. Most people are too focused on, the Twitter or whatever's going on YouTube, whatever the drama at the Libertarian National Committee is. Like, we're usually so far removed from where the actual policy decisions are happening. And even that's how, when we got the law done to make masks optional in school, basically the heroes of that were these two women that just refused to back down from their local school board. And even though the school board would chew them up and spit them out and disrespect them, they just kept showing up and started inviting other people. And then boom, it created a statewide phenomenon because a lot of other people had the same problem. They just, they needed someone to show them how to persist and how to really assert that. So there's a lot of ways to take leadership. It only really takes one person to lead. And that's why the establishment, or whatever you want to call these guys, they want to enforce 100% uniformity, because it really is just one person stepping out of line and being a leader shows other people what it means. So like right now, I'd say the biggest act of rebellion is just being as healthy as possible, because I do subscribe to this idea that we're under a biological war and our immune system is under a direct assault. So like what is more politically powerful right now than not being dependent on pharmacological products? That alone is an act of rebellion. That's way more important than being a Republican, a Libertarian, or anything than that. So, but again, you have to be pretty aware and paying attention pretty closely to realize that your immune system is under attack. So anyway, those are just some additional thoughts. And then for the right wing people that are, again, just be gentle with them. And that's the thing, is like, give room to disagreement and don't put other people down. Like, it's the social in-group thing. So the right wing's going to push back if they feel like they're under attack. If they feel like you're on their side and just trying to hold them to a higher standard, or that you genuinely want what they want, then hopefully you can reach some sort of agreement. And then again, like, always focus on what you agree on. And that might not be a candidate, but it might be a local issue, or it might be a state issue. And, so it's always the thing too, is how we approach these things. And a lot of libertarians, I've noticed, they like, because they think they're so smart and they have all the answers and they got it all figured out, they will kind of take this kind of like antagonistic, confrontational approach where, just because you're right, you can still act with a little humility and give people the luxury of being wrong, or give people the luxury of their point of view. And again, so it's really just social skills. And I think that's what I try to do too. Like, and I learned the importance of this, and I'm still learning the importance of this, is that even if someone comes to me with a really, really vicious disagreement, like they hate what I'm doing, they think it's terrible, like, I still try to be really nice and respectful to that person to the greatest extent possible. Now, again, if they're like a total viper and if they cross the line repeatedly, then I'm going to be very stern and I'm going to like tell them exactly how I feel. But I mean, I do, I think this is even biblical, like, be very gentle and compassionate with the simple-minded. And, just, again, give them the luxury to believe what they believe. And just by that, they're going to like you more, because you're not actively repelling them by telling them they're wrong, or telling them they're doing something stupid, or telling them that their political beliefs are going to destroy the country. Like, even if that's true, there's a better way to kind of finagle it and just be socially graceful, is my 2 cents, man. That's just my thoughts. Who knows what the best approach is?
Well, and that is very interesting. I'm glad you did bring that up. I had actually, so an interesting thing with the way that the 2020 gubernatorial election went here was, it was very much an attack on the Republicans and on the Republican governor, Holcomb, at that time, from the Libertarians, because he was being awful. He did lockdowns, he did mask mandates, he did the whole works. Like, he basically went full left wing on a lot of stuff. And so that was the course of attack for the Libertarian candidate. And it got pushback from a lot of, especially the more.
But let me just be sure, but it also got the best results ever for a Libertarian candidate, right?
Right.
Okay, so there you go. So that's a good metric.
So, and what was really interesting about that was the Libertarian. So I am not necessarily, while I don't dislike it sometimes, I also don't necessarily like it when a Libertarian plays spoiler and upsets a Republican. If they're keeping a good Republican from being successful, then I take serious issue with that.
But then even we can argue a lot about what a good Republican is, and I don't know if there's correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if there's an actual example of a Libertarian denying a good Republican a seat, unless you think there might be.
So that is funny. I talked to Andrew, who does Popular Liberty, over the weekend, and there was one.
I don't know who that is.
You'll have to check him out some.
Okay.
He's a pretty good dude. But he was talking about one in Texas, where he's from, that the Libertarian candidate like actively was campaigning on more or less a right-wing platform, and the margin of victory for a self-proclaimed Marxist left-winger who won was less than what the Libertarian candidate took, like by a lot. So that could have been something that.
Well, yeah. So one, just be sure. I like the way you phrase that. It could have, and then I would be very interested to really look at the margin of the race itself, and then the quality of the candidates, and then what did the Libertarian do to actually campaign. So just because like you're posting on Facebook or stuff, like, again, I think that's like the thing is like how much direct voter contact they did, and then what that messaging would have been like. because I like the way you phrase it, that could have, but I would just be much more interested to really get into the weeds to make one determination or not. But either way, like, then the Republican candidate, I never like blaming. I don't like taking credit for stuff, but I also don't like blaming people for their own failure. And so, like, again, I wonder, how good was the Republican candidate really if they somehow was able to get outflanked on right-wing messaging? Like, I feel like there would have been some mistake then, or anyway, or like,
Yeah.
And so there's always a lot more to the story. And even though, that sounds like a plausible analysis, I would always just want to go those extra 2 or 3 or 4 steps further and just figure out what actually happened. Because I know, like, there are a lot of like registered libertarian voters or voters that vote libertarian that are pro-choice and that, do have some really weird beliefs. Like there was a Libertarian Party candidate in a special election in 2017 for the seat I hold now. And like, I've never met this guy. And like, I've tried to call him and talk to him just because, like, his phone number's in the voter file, but he's like, I have no idea who this guy is. And that's the thing. He talks crap. Every few months, he just pops in to like talk crap or say something like extraordinarily disrespectful. And I just have no idea what this guy's problem is because he's never communicated to me. Like, so like there are a lot of libertarian voters that just hate Republicans and Democrats, and they're not necessarily in play. So I guess just don't assume the voting pattern, because a lot of people vote in a way that you don't expect them to. And I think libertarians in general, like, again, they'll never vote for Republican and Democrat, and that's why they vote Libertarian, because they're not really in play. So anyway, but I could be wrong too. Maybe the guy did cost them the election, and who knows?
That's typically when you do see the Libertarians cost somebody the election, usually it's not a very good candidate that they
right.
So I don't take a lot of issue with that. Something interesting that happened here in Indiana in 2020 was the Libertarian candidate actually came in second in I can't remember, it was like 23 counties or something. Like, it was a significant number of counties where like the Democrats have become the afterthought. Like, they are the third party now, which is
good,
which is really interesting and kind of hopeful, because with Indiana being as conservative as it is for a state, to have people starting to come around, like more or less seeing that, especially Democratic voters, maybe seeing that the Democratic Party is not going to have success in the state. Like, they're not going to have it. And the Libertarian Party could be a better outlet, especially with, I'm originally from Kentucky, and a lot of people that I grew up with are, what you call blue dog Democrats. And they don't actually support anything that the Democratic Party stands for at this point. But they have always been a Democrat, and they will always be a Democrat. And I think there is some radicalization that has been happening over the last four to 6 years, where some of those people are starting to look for an alternative, because they do hold more conservative values, but they don't want anything to do with the GOP. So they'll start to look at the Libertarian Party because it seems to be more of a ideological fit for them. So I do think that in some, especially in this part of the country, there are inroads with some of that demographic.
Well, I mean, so at least in Iowa, like, we had, I guess, would be constitute like a realignment where and again, Obama won Iowa handedly in 08 and 12. And again, against very crappy Republican candidates that inspired no one. And then in 2016 and 2020, Trump performed overwhelmingly well. And areas that had traditionally been very blue, including the district I represent. So I was the first Republican to represent my district in, I think, like 25 years or something. And, I got a lot of credit for that. But in general, just the rural Iowa in particular, and I think it definitely hardened. I mean, I felt it when I was knocking doors in 2018 after the Justice Kavanaugh debacle and how shabbily he was treated and just all the drama there. like, I just could feel the tension and just got that literal feedback from people as I was knocking doors that a lot of people were like really offended and very turned off by that. And were, leaning Republican for that issue alone, and like, are driven by this national narrative. But communities in my area, like Ottumwa, Muscatine, Fort Madison, that had been traditionally blue collar, union workers, Democrat voters, now seemingly have realigned with Republicans, and they are not coming back. Democrats are a very culturally left, economically left party that, by their very platform, seeks to drive people away by all this senseless moralizing and victimizing and blaming others. Like, it's their platform is just shrinking, where they want that just cadre of like true believers, and they eat up anyone who's not lefty pure enough. So it's extraordinarily creepy. Again, I don't know exactly what realm a third party can really play, because I mean, the system is set up to be the first past the post. I mean, single member districts, I think our political voting system more than anything is what kind of necessitates a two-party system. And then that's where the nominating contests, where and again, most rural, or I guess any primary nominating contest, I mean, voter turnout is low, and it does give you an opportunity to be involved in those races. That's why I fell in love with the Iowa caucus for the presidential contest, because literally, in terms of like one person having an oversized influence in the political process, like try being an Iowan caucus organizing, and like your vote literally being worth like, hundreds or 1,000 times more than anyone else's vote in the country, let alone like the world. Like, it really was, as far as Democratic privileges are concerned, like being an Iowa caucus voter is pound for pound the most valuable vote out there. So, I mean, that's the thing. A lot of these contests are decided in low turnout affairs, and certainly like a primary contest, where it typically is like the establishment versus the old guard versus the insurgent wing of the party, whether that's the Democrat Party and like what they see with the Democrat Socialists. And because it's, again, with it. So yeah, America is very polarized between these two parties, but within each party, there's the polarization as well. And that plays out in these primary processes. And that's the thing, where like a lot of these state legislative seats are very safe for one party or other. So if you win a primary, sometimes you can leverage that into a 20-year political career without having to face a serious election, just because, I mean, small numbers, I mean, they do matter. And so, yeah, there is a political alignment going. I just another thought, though, too, because how close was the margin in your governor's race? Like, was there ever like an opportunity where that libertarian could have really spoiled that for the Republicans, or no?
I don't think so.
Well, but then hypothetically, because here, this is what's crazy. So hypothetically, and this is true for like even what I would consider to be like on the polar end of the Republican Party in my caucus, like, so I'm the most medical freedom Republican House member, and then the least Republican House member or whatever, like they're still head and shoulders above the Democrats. So that was very interesting. And so I guess just thinking it through, let's say hypothetically, the Libertarian Party of Indiana did cost the Republican Party of Indiana the governorship, and then you got someone who's an even worse tyrant. Well, then it would be on the Libertarian Party to really be the true leaders in like this concept of civil disobedience or non-cooperation with evil. And that's ultimately what the Libertarian Party should be, because I think now more than ever, we need direct action. And I mean, I think Gandhi and Martin Luther King really kind of wrote the playbook in terms of like, I mean, it was coming with these lockdown. I mean, that's what we need. And Rand Paul, I think, just got censored for saying this, but we need citizens to lead us into not cooperating with the evil dictates that are traumatizing our children, that are doing all these terrible things. We're locking down the old people again because, we don't want to challenge the federal money that necessitates that we have to lock people down, and all the emotional trauma, and like these crazy people that it's like, I had this on Facebook post, and this guy, he comes in and justifies all this, and he's explaining to me why it's so important that we test people, twice weekly and all this stuff. And I'm like, dude, did you ever talk to the patients, or excuse me, the residents? Like, it's just so crazy, the arrogance. But I mean, honestly, that's the political leadership we need in this moment of time. And who else is going to do it? And I think that's like the thing is like, yeah, voting is important. Elections are important, but so is our behavior. So is our compliance. And like, certainly, in the Vietnam War, the people that were standing up for the draft, I mean, they were the real leaders, and they were the ones leading the resistance to the warfare state. So, you don't have to be a candidate. You don't have to be, there's so many different styles of grassroots activists you can be. I was joking on like the psilocybin mushroom discussion, is like even just getting arrested and pleading your case in court and like asserting whatever your rights are or whatever your arguments are, because that's basically all we do. Like, is we should, the law really only says whatever a judge says it does based on however it's being argued in court. So it's like, anyway, there's so many opportunities for basically, it's not so much what you believe, but what are you willing to do based on those beliefs? And that's what really matters. And that is so much more valuable than your vote, or a political donation or anything else. It's like people who will truly lead, truly put these ideas into practice, people who will change the world. And I mean, the civil rights leaders are a perfect example. I mean, Martin Luther King was never elected. Rosa Parks was never elected. Harriet Tubman never elected. So, but they had more profound social change than anyone could ever imagine, because they practiced what they preach and they put their lives on the line to advocate for it, or to be it. They actually lived it. So yeah, anyway, there's a lot of work to do. And yeah, we can, talk about all this bullshit election drama. And yeah, it would be awesome if the Libertarian Party was able to oust a Republican governor, but then they would have to take the lead and respond and address the tyranny that they usher in by doing that. So anyway, just throwing a lot more stuff at you.
Indiana probably would have been a really interesting case study for a Libertarian to not necessarily win, but to upset the Republican governor and give the Democrat a win, because it would have been the most toothless Democratic governor on the planet. Like, with the supermajority that the Republicans have in the House and Senate here in the state, that might
that would be a very interesting dynamic. Yeah,
that might have actually pushed those guys to start passing some of the legislation that they avoid, like constitutional carry, actually reeling in executive order power by the governor, like some of the stuff that the Republicans won't do because they do hold a majority and they don't have any challenge. Like, if that had happened, that could have actually been a net positive.
It would have been interesting.
Yeah, I would. Which then at the same time you get Kentucky, which is maybe not as much of a Republican supermajority, but Republicans control a lot of Kentucky, and they haven't really done much of anything against Bashir and all of what he's been doing. So that's, then there's that other side of the coin.
The work in progress, and I mean, it's creepy how quickly things are moving, but I don't know. Hopefully it's not too late, because again, like a lot of politics is reactionary too. And like, that's an unfortunate reality, but it's the truth, is that most people, are just politically involved as a reaction to whatever's happening. And so I don't know, at least in Iowa, with the harder they're pushing, the more and more people are showing up and getting involved. And it's new people who are new to the political process. And it's just because, now it's touching on their life in a very intimate way. And they're like regretting, oh, I wish I would have been involved 5 years ago, because, this is, in retrospect, it's so obvious to see the evil coming. But when it's happening in real time, it's like a little bit harder to, I don't know. But it's so yeah, I'm still optimistic that we can kind of turn things around. But again, there does need to be leaders. I mean, leadership is a great intangible. Basically, that's the thing, is people are always looking to someone else to take initiative. And that's just this kind of socialization we have, is like, nobody wants to be the first. It is dangerous out there to be a leader. So like, not like physically dangerous, but like, mentally, emotionally, like I get a lot of slings and arrows, and it used to bother me. And then I was able to learn how to get over it, because I realized nobody really cares. And that it's not really personal about me anyway. It's like, they're just projecting who they think I am. So it's like, not, anyway, it's very strange. But yeah, no matter what, we have our work cut out for us. And it's clear that, all these political institutions are failing. Whether it's the Republican Party, the Democrat Party, or the Libertarian Party, they're all failures in their own right. And it's really just the people need to figure out how to become as empowered in their own life. And I think what we're seeing now is, we need to really adopt that ethos of the civil rights movement and kind of realize that our human liberty is on the chopping block. And, we're going to need that kind of level of devotion or commitment to, I don't use the word resist. I don't like that word, but non-cooperation with evil, or firmness in truth. I don't know. I something that I read Gandhi. I started reading a lot of Gandhi in like 2013, and that kind of was like my departure from most traditional libertarian intellectualism. Like I got on this really kind of more Eastern spiritual bent, and I've never turned back since then because I think it's like right. And I have been surprised by how little the libertarian kind of circles talk about the science of civil disobedience, because it's like it's been in society for a while, and it's big in American history, not only from the revolution, but the emancipation movement as well. And then, I mean, all over the world, this has been more or less what really causes like governments to topple, is that the people just stop cooperating. And it surprises me now how many libertarians are still, drinking Coca-Cola or, I mean, whatever. But I guess I shouldn't judge them for that because I'm a hypocrite too. So whatever.
The civil disobedience thing is, like they want to change policy and they want to make a difference like in the right way or whatever, but civil disobedience is the way to do it. Sal the agorist had a interview with Mark Clare a couple weeks ago, and he talked about like Gandhi and what he did with to bypass the salt tax that Britain had on India, that they just went and they got their own salt. Then they didn't have to pay the salt tax, and it basically toppled an empire just by.
Well, it took. I mean, I think it took several years after that, and Gandhi died believing he was a failure because they were partitioning, Pakistan and India. But yeah, they were willing to disobey. They were willing to get the crap kicked out of them. But then also they did follow like a set of instructions of clearly communicating the grievances, clearly and dispassionately outlining the injustices that are occurring, which is a huge step that's like often skipped over, is like clearly and unequivocally stating like what it is you have a problem with and kind of drafting that kind of petition to address the grievance. And then once that's ignored, then yeah, you do the next step or whatever. But like there is a clear kind of outline on how these things are supposed to be occurring. I think Letters to a Birmingham Jail is probably one of the best things written in American history. And ironically, it was written while he was in jail, so like there's a lot of productive things you can do when you're in jail. Being in jail can be great for people, it's like, and anyway, so yeah, we need to be actively exploring this. I'm happy that conversation is being had, because Gandhi would talk about like a spiritual or a soul force. And he said, that it only takes, if one person could withdraw their support from evil from a deep enough level, then he believed the evil would collapse because it wasn't supported. And that's it, is we're supporting this evil. People are unconsciously going along with it. And even a lot of people who call themselves libertarian or conservative, are supporting it in one way or another. And it's really frightening. So.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully we'll see a turnaround of that here in the near future, especially as things seem to be pushing forward in a much more evil direction. Well, Jeff, I don't want to take too much more of your time. I know you got stuff going on. I appreciate it very much for coming on, and all of this was excellent. I really appreciate it, and take this opportunity to let you plug anything you got going on. Or
yeah, happy to help. Thanks for asking great questions and kind of exploring some of these interesting concepts. And I think that's what we need. We just need more depth, because people have like a closed-minded and like, oh, this is the only way to do it. And like, again, there's a million ways to do it. And we're all kind of sitting at the bottom of this very tall mountain. So it's really just find a way, find a trail to hike up and do the best you can. People can follow my work at www.peaceloveiowa.com, facebook.com/peaceloveiowa. Look me up on YouTube or Twitter. I'm trying to get more solid content. We're drafting some legislation in Iowa right now. We want to basically affirm civil rights, that civil rights do exist, and that we're not going to exclude people from society based on their, medical status. So yeah, we have a lot of important things in the works. Come to Iowa, celebrate the state fair, be healthy, be happy. Emotional health is the foundation of physical health. So like, don't be angry. Tell people you love them, forgive people who hurt you. I think A lot of respiratory distress is caused by people holding on to grief. There's a lot of things that happen in our lives that we're sad about, and we carry it forward, and we need to just kind of wash that, because there's so many emotions that are stuck in us. And even the propaganda, like, my understanding is scientifically, basically, it's like people are traumatized, and then this propaganda triggers people's traumas. And they show this too in the DNA that, like, generationally, if there was a famine, like there was the famine in the Netherlands in the early part of the century, and like for generations to come, you can find that methylation marker in their genetic code. So the traumas from generations ago, whether that's war, whether that's famine, whether that's whatever it was, that's in your DNA. And so, like, the media, they flash these traumatizing images, and it's like a trauma-based mind control. They basically threaten you with trauma unless you comply with whatever they're telling you, and it's marvelously effective. And that's why that's why people freak out. That's why they get triggered, because they are in pain, because they've been traumatized. And then, so that's kind of what we're up against. That's kind of how the brain control, mind washing works. So, be gentle, be compassionate, but there's a lot of snakes out there. So anyway, love everyone, and thanks for the opportunity, and hopefully we can all talk again soon.
Definitely. Thanks for coming on, Jeff.
All right, see ya.